Yeah, you. I love the guys who are sitting there in the back. I love them a lot.
So we learned how to take a proper picture, an X-ray.
Picture. Ah.
So we need to
If you say a picture, then probably you're in wrong class. You have to go to photography sessions, right? I just this morning was sitting and reading a Crisis magazine, and in that they do offer photography. That's what I learned today. Morning 4 o'clock. That's what I was doing. Anyways, so how to obtain a good X-ray?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to have open contact, and we need to have 2 meters away from the apical, and like the lighting shouldn't be like too much for me.
Lighting. Huh. Is there any scientific jargon for that rather than lighting? I know you love photography, it looks like, but
Contrast.
contrast. Okay. Okay. By the way, I did not get your name.
Mohammed.
Muhammad. Okay. Okay. How about here? Andrea's Lane. Yes. Your name, please.
Priya?
Priya Shah. Okay.
We also learned about the different teeth that should be in the X-ray for the different full mouth. So, yeah.
Say for instance, if you want to capture the upper right molar, so where do you place your right?
Upper original.
Right molar.
Then we would place it between the first and second, and at the second. At the,
First and second premolar,
Oh,
molar.
molar.
Yes.
On the second molar, so 15.
On second molar. Absolutely correct. Okay.
Question about that. If someone has third molars, or doesn't have third molars, I should say, and you're trying to capture the molars, should you center it between the first and second molar? Or is it
No, you
always
should
just on-
always place on the second molar, because the only reason you have to place on the second molar is because sometimes you may see a dilacerated root like this. In that scenario, you may miss if you place on the first molar. Yes.
What if you don't have a second molar?
Huh, there will be always exceptions. So what we could use is, we can use cotton wool to stabilize, but you want to still capture that region. If the patient is a regular patient in your office, then we could get a pan, because we know that there is nothing in the bone. But if you're seeing a new patient, probably in that scenario, you need to see what is there underneath the alveolar ridge. Okay, anything else? Brian? Do you remember anything from last week's session?
Well, whether a bite wing or whether a pan would be more appropriate depending on what you're trying to see, which one you might want to use. If I remember correctly, it was pretty common to take a whole series, but there are certain applications or things that you're looking at. One would be more diagnostically useful than another.
Okay. That's good. Rama? Yes, what do you remember? Because you are the notes taker.
For periapical radiographs, you have to catch 2 millimeters past the root.
Okay.
And you have to catch an open bite, not open bite, open contact.
Okay.
We learned about the different radiographs and what each one looks like.
Okay. So now, with that, do you guys have any question from last week's session? Yes.
Can you cover again what counts as an open contact?
So, so imagine these are your teeth, right? So when I say open contact, you should be able to see if the X-ray is passing in between these teeth, and you are able to see like this open contacts. Okay. So what do I mean by close contacts? So if you are not, say imagine Your teeth are like this. And remember, in the paralleling technique, everything should be parallel. Teeth and the x-rays that are coming there should be perpendicular, and the sensor also should be parallel to the teeth. So if it's like this, then you are going to capture. Say for instance, if you change a little bit of angulation like this, or like this, then you are not going to open the contacts because you have changed the angulation. So there will be a superimposition of the interproximal regions. So it will be something like this, rather than like this. Why? Why this is so critical? Because with our naked eye, we will not be able to see what is in between the teeth. That's why it is so critical that we want to see the open contacts. Okay? For instance, patients that they have diastema, like gaps, like this, it's easy to open contact. You don't have to do anything, literally, right? You can place the radiographs, the x-rays, the contacts will be open pretty much. So when you're doing your competency, please make sure that you select the patient appropriately or correctly. So don't come and tell me, okay, this patient has malocclusion class 2, class 3, and I was not able to. No, that's not my problem, right? For instance, if you take both, right, class 2 cavity, they specifically say that there should be an adjacent tube, because otherwise you are not going to prep the class 2. It's the same thing, patient selection. By that time, in your 4th year, you should be able to say that I can judge my patient, I can take good full nonsense. Is it too much to ask? And you have, starting from 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year, to do your competency. I'm not asking that you have to finish in 2nd year, no. I'm giving you so much of time. You could select any patient during the whole time. Please don't come and say that, Dr. Syed, this is the only patient I saw. No, it's impossible to believe that you saw only one patient throughout your 2nd year, 3rd year, and 4th year, right? It's hard to believe. Because we see like almost 8,000 patients in a year at this study school. Yes?
So yesterday I was the patient of a student doing the competency
Uh-huh.
in the clinic, and she had some problems getting all of my roots in, because I have really long roots, and she adjusted the sensor on the inside of the term is, I don't know the term, but the different colored plastic, and she would move it so that she would, and if in the first picture when it was done properly it wouldn't come in, she would adjust it so that there was more, so the sensor could detect a little bit higher, but even so, she couldn't get all of them. Is there anything you would advise in that case?
So we have sensors that are like size 2 and size 1. So if you, for instance, select size 1 sensor and try to obtain radiographs for the molar teeth, because we know molar tooth is a huge tooth, you are going to miss. So selection of the sensor is very, very important. And the second thing is, sometimes the roots may be long. In that scenario, yes, you may have to flip the sensor. That's ideally it's not the right technique, but that's the best you could do in that particular scenario. Yes.
Sometimes teeth are interposed just because, especially in the anterior teeth. I mean, do you just do the best you can there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we do have Erin, so she took my class last year. Maybe she can talk to you guys for 5 minutes and tell her experience. I believe she was a class topper last year, so.
Well, just don't take this very, very seriously. Have fun with it. It's not as hard as it seems. I don't know, if you know your anatomy, this class is so much easier, so really study this fall. He gives out a link that you can put all the pictures in our full mouth series, and that really helps for the exams. Trying to think what we did last year. I don't know, I sat in my first class yesterday, and I know I need to review because just don't cram it in, actually learn it because we're building on it as we did yesterday, and I didn't forget it all, so I gotta learn it again. When you do the skulls and take pictures, is it admitting that we do it in?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
They'll be starting today.
Okay, don't get frustrated with it. Take some rubber bands, try a bunch of pictures because it really helps. I mean, we haven't done any x-rays really since then, so definitely take your time and do it. Don't hurry out of there. I don't know, am I missing anything?
If you have any questions, Erin, her name is Erin, E-R-I-N, so you can talk to her to get an inside scoop.
The tutors are really helpful too. Really helpful for taking pictures and learning.
We have lots of students and we have lots of faculty, we have lots of staff to help you guys, so we are here to help. Okay.
Have fun with
So
it.
if you don't come and ask me questions, it is hard for me to read each and every individual's mind. So please, you guys are here to learn, and I am here to facilitate your learning. Okay?
It seems kind of scary, but it's actually really nice.
Yes, thanks for the last tip, yes. My facial expressions are little,
Calls you out all the time.
yes.
So when taking,
Thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
when taking a ankle X-ray in the back, obviously the curvature of the teeth can get a little extreme on that. So if we're going in the back, getting a very back, we want a very safe teeth. But we also want to see 14 instead of 13 in the X-ray, obviously. And you want open contact, and since that curvature is really extreme, where would we give the preference to on getting that contact? Because sometimes if the teeth are angled like that, you're never going to get, even if you angulate it in the perfect way, you're only going to get an open contact on that.
You will get it.
Okay.
Because the way the arch is, it's going to be like, it's pretty much straight. In fact, when you look into the oral cavity, the arch that goes like this, from premolar to the molar region, it's pretty straight actually. We may think that there will be curvature, but no, 90% of the times, the answer is no. That's why you should know where exactly to place the bite. If you know that trick, it's super easy.
Yeah. Well, I'm not worried about the 90%. I'm only worried about 10.
Don't worry about 10%, okay? Don't think about extremes, okay? Think about normal things, okay? Okay, with that, we'll start our session. So before we jump into the, do you want to adjust lights? You can adjust the lights there, right? Little more. If the other students are okay, it's fine with me. I don't think they can see very clearly if we have too much of light. So think this part of your session as if you are owning a car, right? If you own a car, you should know few things, right? For instance, when to change oil, right? You know when to change oil? Right? Why do you care? You are not a mechanic, right? Why should you know? And what is the tire pressure you should have? 25 psi for the front, 35 or depending on the car that you drive. Why? Then when there is a check engine light, you should know that you should take this vehicle to a mechanic, right? On similar lines, when you are using X-ray unit, you should know about few things, how it is being operated. That's what we will discuss today. So if you look on the right-hand side, the picture, that's the X-ray tube head. If you break it open, this is what you're going to see. Basically, glass enclosure, and it has got a cathode and anode. So this is the picture or a diagrammatic representation of what is happening in the X-ray tube. So we do have a cathode and anode, and the electrons are coming from the cathode and it's going to hit the anode, and this is where the X-rays will be coming. So this X-ray tube is covered by gas envelope because it produces a lot of heat. So when the electrons are hitting the anode, 99% is heat production. Only 1% we are getting X-rays. So that means the whole process is useless. But whatever like we are getting is 1%, and we are going to use that 1% to obtain the X-rays. So since it is going to absorb a lot of heat, you need to have the properties that can absorb heat. Basically, like very high melting point, or it should absorb the within the glass there will be also some insulating oil. It can absorb the heat, and there will be vacuum as well. And then this, the part, the X-rays that are coming, it's made up of beryllium, so that the X-rays can pass through. So we'll go a little more into the details of how the cathode works, anode works. So cathode, basically it's negatively charged. As you can see, it has got a focusing cup. It's like this one. So basically, by having the focusing cup, it's going to tell like the electrons to go and hit the anode in one direction. So it is channeling. And it should have very high melting point because it should not melt because of the heat. And the electrons that are coming from the cathode, they are like kind of little boiling. Those who love making tea, and they put a tea kettle, you can see it's bubbling off like steam, right? Pretty similar to that. The electrons will be coming from the cathode, and it's going to hit the anode. So the process is called as fermionic emission. This is your exam question. So for sure you're going to get like electrons are being produced by what method? It's fermionic emission. So now earlier we talked about cathode. Now let's talk a little bit about anode. So anode is positively charged. It has to have a very, very high melting point because it's coming with a high temperature. It should not melt, so it should have very high melting point. And generally the material that is used is tungsten, and it has got a very high atomic number. The other thing that I want you to focus or learn a little bit is, if you compare two images, which one do you think is looking much better? So this one, right? So why do you think this is looking better? What are the characteristic features that you are seeing much better? I forgot to mention there may be a slight change with your PowerPoint, very minor, like a couple here and there. Last night I may have added a few things, thinking that this might be helpful. So very minimal changes. This is better compared to this one. What do you see here? Yes.
I feel like there's better contrast on the posterior aspect where you can see different.
You can see better trabecular pattern, right? Yes. So what is the difference that you are seeing here? Is KV is 70 here, and the MA is the same. The only thing that is changed in here is focal spot, right? Compared to this one. So if you have a smaller focal spot, then you are going to get a better picture or better image. So how can we do that? So as I told you, there is a cathode and anode, but the anode is not straight. It's angled like this. The angling is called as line focus principle. So why do we do that? The reason we do that is because by angling it a little, like 20 degrees in this case, you are reducing the portion the electrons are hitting the anode to a smaller region. So that means if you have a smaller focal spot, you'll get a bit better image quality. That's what we are trying to achieve, and that's why it's called as the anode is at an angle. And that term, what we call is line focus principle. Again, important for your boards. So the bottom line is you should have a smaller focal spot, and especially with our dental things, like smaller tooth, you need a better image quality. So that means we use smaller focal spot. So now, there are two types of anodes. One is called as rotating one, the other one is called as stationary anode. What we use in dental field is a stationary anode. The rotating anode is being used in CT. So what is going to happen here is the anode is going to rotate. Since it is rotating every time the electrons are coming and hitting at this particular spot, right? Since it is rotating, it's going to hit at different areas. So what is the advantage of that? So anode is going to last much longer. So if you have rotating anodes, so they are going to last very long. So shelf life of an X-ray unit will be much more. But the downside is it will be very expensive. So since in dental field, we don't want to pay too much of money, so we use stationary anodes. Whereas CT scans, they use rotating anodes, and that's why they're so expensive.
What do you mean it lasts longer?
So this anode has to be replaced after a certain period of time, because every time it's going to hit, this metal is going to degrade its quality. Then the X-ray units will start falling apart. So we'll go into the details maybe in the next hour, why it is important that we have, what we have to do with older machines. So you may have seen this picture, right? Generators. So we do use generators in X-ray unit as well. So there are a couple that we use. So in United States, we use the power that's 110 to 120 volts, right? Whereas when you're taking an X-ray, it is like 60,000 kilovolts. So how do you go from 120 to 60,000 kilovolts? Is using the transformers. So learn about these electrical terms. Maybe for your boards they may ask, but I'm not going to ask you for your exam. Okay. So there are basically two types of transformers. One is step down and step up transformer. So step down, like as I told you, if you want to release the electrons on the cathode side, the voltage that is coming from the alternating current is 110. So you may want to reduce that to 10 electron volts. So you use something called a step down transformer. That's being used on the cathode side. On the anode side, you want to increase to 70,000 kilovolts. So you use something called a step-up transformer. So there should be a good potential difference between cathode and anode so that the electrons can go and hit the anode. So if you are those who love physics or diagrams, anybody? Nobody? Nobody took the physics class? Seriously? Yes. Okay. What's your name, please?
Bethany?
Bethany. Okay. Can you enlighten me a little bit on this?
It's voltage versus time. And then from that, can you get also the period and the frequencies
Okay.
of the alternating current?
So basically, if you put a diagrammatic presentation of alternating current, what we use here is it goes like 60 cycles up and 60 cycles down. So that's why it's 120, right? 60 and 60. So the up portion, what you see, like with the lines, is only useful for getting X-rays. So the down portion is not useful because it's alternating, right? So that means it's not a useful thing. So you have to rectify that. What is the downside? Is if you are going to use the alternating current, when you press the button, right, it releases X-rays for 60 seconds, and then it will stop, and again it will start. So that means you are exposing more to the patient. So what if we could rectify like this one? This is called as half wave rectification. Like this one, there is no negative thing. And this is full wave rectification. So by doing that, we can increase the efficiency and decrease the patient time, exposure time. Why this is so critical? Why do you think we care about less time to the patient? What could happen if you put more time?
More X-ray exposures.
Yes. Anything else other than that?
It's gonna get hotter in there.
Okay. Other than that.
And it's your time, so it's your time is money.
Time is money. Okay.
Discomfort.
Discomfort too.
The patient, if they have.
Yes. What if the patient is shaky like this? You don't want to hold the button forever, right? So you want to decrease the time. If you're treating a pediatric patient, they're not going to stay stable for like this, right? Or a patient who is pretty elderly patient, like 70s or 80s, with this, you think you can? No. So you want to, at the time, you want to reduce the time. So what you do is put maximum MA, and then you reduce the time. So this is like, in the analogy that I would like to use is, if you're driving like a 50 miles an hour to reach a destination, say for example Columbus, in 1 hour, but you want to reach in 25 minutes, what do you do? What do you do? Double the speed, right? The same thing here, we increase MA here so that you reduce the time. Make sense? That's exactly what is called as rectification. So now, this is a diagrammatic representation. I think I have added this. I don't think you guys have in your. So this is nice bell-shaped curve. This is what we want to achieve, ideally. Or at least like this, where there is continuous beam or X-ray exposure. So with the DC current, so what we are using is alternating current current machines or some of the machines, they are like a DC, direct current. So that means we don't have to have alternating current, where they produce the current not in an alternating fashion, in a direct fashion. So you get a continuous exposure and less time to the patient. That's what we are using currently. So the bottom line is DC current is useful if you are going to buy an X-ray. Don't go with alternating. That's the bottom line. Yes, yes. Say for example, you are in North Dakota. I don't know why I love North Dakota, but so you may want to purchase an X-ray unit. And sales rep will come and he or she has to make some money, right? They'll tell you all these fancy things and bells and whistles of X-ray. But what is the science behind it in your purchasing an X-ray? You should know as a clinician. So don't buy an alternating current machine that uses alternating current X-ray. So use a DC unit. That's the point. Does it make sense? So nothing against the sales representatives. They are doing their job, and my job is to provide science. What is helpful for you guys? How can you succeed in your practices? So this is, again, how you can rectify using the continuous X-ray generator. So one thing that I want you to focus is something called as duty cycle. So time and time I see, in spite of telling in the class, the students, they don't follow a rule, something called as duty cycle. So what exactly do I mean by duty cycle? Once you press the button, it has to cool down. And then you can make one more exposure. Because as I told you, from the anode to, from cathode to anode, there will be a stream of electrons and they are going to produce a lot of heat, and that heat has to be dissipated completely before you make one more exposure. So the sequence from one exposure to the next exposure, there is a time gap. You can't, even if you hold the button, X-rays will not be released. That's called as the duty cycle. So once you release the button, that means the X-ray exposure is stopped. So you can walk into the area safely. Does it make sense? I see that students will not walk into the area after they press the button. In spite of me telling again, I may see some of you guys will be still following some old myths. So as soon as you release the finger from your button, it's safe to walk, because X-rays are not being released. Okay? Yes?
How long is the duty cycle?
So it depends on the machine. So generally it's like very few milliseconds, 4 to 5. So any questions with anode, cathode, focusing cup, fermionic emission? So if I ask you 5 things about this particular session, what do you guys can tell? Just 5 things. Yes, Julia.
Electrons are produced by thermal emission.
Fermionic emission.
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Good. She got one question right. Yes.
Going from cathode to anode.
Yes.
Kind of like a battery.
Yes. Okay.
Always DC better than AC.
Wonderful. Okay.
And then smaller focal point gives a better image.
Focal spot. Yes.
Focal spot.
Yes. Did we cover 4? Yes. What's your name?
I'm Ina,
Anna. Okay.
and as a clinician, we would want to purchase a alternating current X-ray machine.
Ah, good. Anything else? I love those guys. Is your name Mallory? Heather, okay. Okay, Heather.
The duty cycle,
Oh,
yeah, so you have to wait for how many seconds you say, like 3 to 5.
are you sure?
I'm not sure. I just hear that first. But you have to wait for some time for it to cool down to take the next X-ray.
Yes.
But what's the time? How long is it?
So anywhere between 3 to 4 milliseconds. Yes. So we are not talking even about seconds, we are talking about milliseconds. Okay? Good. Yes.
So if it's just 45 milliseconds, you don't really have to wait, right? So you can just.
You are smart. That's why probably she is a note taker. Yes. Yes, you do have to wait for 5 milliseconds because you can see on the timer that it's cooling down. Yes.
I just have a quick question. Instead of rotating camera tubes, are you using CT and stationary ones?
Stationary ones that we use in dental X-ray units and dental CBCT scans.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say the CT scan is also stationary?
No,
The dental CT.
dental CT, yes. So if you guys are familiar with a CBCT scan, cone beam computed tomography, probably you may have seen in orthodontic offices, oral surgery offices. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Would we like recommend CT to a patient in the case is very particular, or we don't like?
Can you hold on to that question for a little later in the semester? Don't worry, we are going to cover that. Okay, then I'm going to ask you that question. And you are going to answer, yes.
How is a cone beam able to do that and be stationary and still get the?
Don't worry, we'll
Z-stabs?
don't worry, we'll get there. We'll get there. One step at a time.
Okay.
Otherwise, I will never be able to finish my so-called targeted lessons. Okay, let's see the interactions of X-ray beams with the matter. So basically, in this part of session, what we'll talk is once the X-rays are released, what is going to happen if it's going to hit the patient's bone? That's what our topic will be of discussion. Okay, what is going to happen if the X-ray is going to hit the patient's skin? And can you manipulate a few things so that we can get a better image? So some of the things that we talk are like MA and KV and the distance and filtration. So basically, when you looked on the control panel, you have MA, you have KV, you have time. If you remember the picture, the white one, right? So can you change something to make a better image quality? So for instance, if the patient is a little healthier, let's say chubby, right? What do you want to do? You want to increase MA, right? Because it has to penetrate the skin and then it has to come all over, all the other side, and then the sensor has to capture. If the patient is a little skinnier, you may want to reduce MA. Or now, there might be some machines, there is a MA is fixed. Only you can change time. So in that scenario, you may have to play with time. You may have to increase more time so that the X-rays can penetrate more. So I know that's the downside is you're exposing more. But what they do is limit MA by the manufacturer. So this slide basically tells if you increase too much of MA, then you are going to get a pretty darker image. Can you dim the lights? I think Julia can't see.
I
I think you have to change that one by a switch up there.
Oh, okay, let's see. I will have very hard time. The best I could make is like a movie theater.
Maybe other switches?
The white one.
The white ones?
Yeah.
Okay. Better?
Thank you. That's a lot
Oh,
better.
yeah, so now you can see, right?
Right.
So remember, I'm not sure whether I told you guys in the class very beginning, I like only 3 colors. And I can see only 3 colors. One black, white, gray. That's it. Anything, I don't care. Right? That's $8. So basically, for me, I need to have a good contrast. So that means you have to either play with the MA or with the time. So if the patient is chubbier, then you have to increase MA or time. Yes.
So, did you mention another reason to increase time? I don't understand. I don't understand.
Yes. Can you wait for a few more slides? I'll get back to that, yes.
Why does the image become too dark?
Because you are releasing more photons. So you need to release only certain amount of photons so that they can pierce through the skin and the sensor can capture an image. So if you release too many photons, then it's going to cause darker because more photons are being released and it causes noise. It causes the contrast issues. Yes?
You take an X-ray on a patient and they're like very conscious of they don't want X-rays taken or they don't want to be overexposed, and your X-ray is a little too light. Is there anything on the computer where you can add contrast, or does that like mess up the quality of your image?
That's the last session of my, what do you call that? This semester, yes, lecture. We will talk about digital imaging. How can you manipulate it? What can you do? Yes, we are too far for that, so yes. So if you are using too little MA, this is what you are going to get. So in this scenario, you may want to increase MA to the next level.
Dr. Syed,
Yes.
quick question. You were saying photons earlier. I thought from like the previous lecture we were talking about electrons moving.
Okay. Oh, good question. Okay, electrons are from cathode to anode. And once they hit the anode, whatever is being released is photons or X-rays.
So the actual X-ray stuff is photons, not
Yes.
electrons.
That is absolutely correct. So, we could manipulate kV as well. kV is kilovolts peak. So generally for dental units or dental X-ray units, we use between 60 and 70. That's the standard. If you are using a CT scanner, then you may change or it will be higher or different. So for our dental purposes, you may want always the kV to be less. So low kV it will give you a better contrast. Why do we need a better contrast? So that you can identify dental caries, you can identify enamel, dentin, plaque. So this is too much of gray. So that means there is a problem with kV. So you may want to lower kV. So the bottom line is high MA, low kV, always your settings. So Next is filtration. We'll talk about filtration. There are two types of filtration that are available. One is the manufacturer himself is going to add. The other one is the added filtration. Why do we want the filtration? So when we talked about KV electrons, like we said, we are changing from 110 kilovolts to 60,000 kilovolts, right? So there is a range of photons that are being released. So the lower energy photons, they cannot penetrate the skin. Or even if they penetrate the skin, it's going to not help us to get a good image quality. So you want to remove those low energy photons. How do you do that? By adding a filtration. You could use aluminum filtration so that it's going to absorb the low energy photons. Like for example, when you took your D80s, right? The cutoff was for our school was like 20-ish, right? Something like that, right? So anybody with 15, do you take it? No. Why? Why?
They're not likely to pass boards.
Yeah, the same thing. What we do is we add a filtration here so that it's not going to touch the skin, because if it's going to touch the skin, it's not helpful for the image quality. So you want to remove those ones. So this is without aluminum, and this is what you want to see, like a nice bell-shaped curve. If you add aluminum, this is what you're going to see, and we do add aluminum filtration, like 2.5 millimeters. And if you can see here, this is the image that depicts, compared to this one, only few things are penetrating or hitting the body. The other thing is something called as collimation, or also called as beam restricting device. So basically, if you may have seen the X-ray tube, right? It's round. So you could add a collimation, like a rectangular collimator, and then you can make it from here all the way to like this, so that the skin exposure from round goes like this, and it becomes a little less. So by doing that, you are reducing the noise, you are improving the image contrast, and then what is going to happen is the skin, the outside, the area that is not required will not be exposed. Yes?
So, with that in mind, since light is unidirectional beam is collimated, why, because this has always bothered me, people walk out of the room, go and press the button, won't even go anywhere near the tube, but if you understand that concept that it's for the most part a unidirectional beam, then why a 6-foot distance as opposed to a 3-foot distance? Are you really getting any radiation coming off of that?
Yes. If you can hang on to another 15-20 minutes of our lecture, then I would answer your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's something called as secondary or scattered photons. So what is going to happen is high energy photons, they will hit the body. Sometimes they get released, and once it reacts with the air, then they are not anymore unidirectional. They can deflect any direction. So that's one of the reasons we want you guys to stand at one area. We'll talk in next class about radiation safety, like where exactly you're supposed to stand, why the distance is critical. You guys are like cruising through, man. So the bottom line is, if you add collimation, it's going to reduce noise. Noise is not good, because that's why you use noise cancelling headphones, right, during your gym. You don't want any noise, because you want to concentrate on your treadmill, whatever it is, right? Or any music. Same thing, we don't want noise here. So you want to reduce from here all the way to here. Yes. So how do you do? Is from brown, you can make it like a rectangle. So just by adding that collimator, you can see the difference between from this image to this. We did not do anything. We did not change MA, we did not change KB, we did not change time. Just by adding that should happen. So now, when you go to your practices, do you think you can use this one? At least 1%? I know most of the dental officers, they don't like to use, because they say that, one, it will give you a lot of bone cuts. So that means they may have to retake. So that means it's more radiation to the patient. But in fact, when you practice, that's what we are going to do today. Some of your classmates, when they come, we use collimators. We try to reduce the dose to the patient. In this case, the skull. Okay? So, the other collimators that are available in the market are something like this. Again, I don't have any financial interest in any of those collimators. So, it's good science. So, please try to use the new practice. So, they always say that, yes.
If any of those tubes is too long, as it passes through the initial window, you can send it to diffract outward. If the tube is too long, it's possible that the rays will bounce off within the tube and create.
So we do have that's why we use a long cone technique or paddling technique. The cone itself is certain length. We don't use like too long or too short. So there is science behind that they use. I don't remember exactly the length, like 12 inches, something like that. So that's what the standard thing we use.
But they're all designed so that we couldn't possibly miss
Yes.
that.
Yes. So, if you're dealing with radiation, the rule that you have to remember is you have to stay away from the radiation as far as possible, right? For instance, if you're closer, so imagine there is a X-ray source or radiation source. If you're closer to this, you will get hit with a lot more radiation. As you go down here, less. So that's what the inverse principle is. So if you go too much far, you're going to reduce the contrast. So you need to maintain optimal distance to get an image contrast. And the same rule is if you're standing from the X-ray unit, as far as you stand, like in our dental, it's 6 feet, it's safe. Does it make sense? Because the scattered radiation is not going to hit you. Even if it's going to hit you, it's like flurries, no? Snow flurries that as soon as it touches your body, what is it? It falls off, right? Pretty similar, because it doesn't have enough energy to penetrate the skin. Because it has lost all the energy. Yes?
When you use a nomad or a handheld device, is there not as much scatter? Like, why can't you stand so close?
Good question. Okay, so that part I did not include in the lecture because I hate nomads. Okay, why I do hate nomads is they do a very good job, provided if you follow the instructions properly. So nomad is basically one of the X-ray units that like a mobile device. It's a handheld. It's like pretty much like a gun that you can hold it. It's good in the surgical suites, or if the patient is like a pediatric patient, you can just go there and press. You get very easily. So that way it is really good. But the downside is if you don't follow the protocol, meaning to say that it's like a gun. So you'll have something like this. The X-ray units are being released, and you have a handle so that you can hold, and you have to use the other hand to stabilize, and you are supposed to stand behind because there is a particle called glass that will protect you from the scatter. For example, if you're not standing behind exactly like this, and if you're going to stand like this, you will be exposed. And the same thing, if you're going to stand like this, you will be exposed. So most of the dental officers I have seen like this and like this. And that's one of the reasons I hate. In spite of repeated tellings, they don't follow the protocol. And unnecessarily they will be exposed. So that's the downside of no match. But there are really good things. If you follow the protocol, if you stand behind exactly, then it's really good. Do you think we can take a break for 3 minutes? Let's do it fast. Make it 1.5. And I have to leave you guys at 9:30, right? Let's see. 9:30? First class, I let it go, because I want to have a good impression. Right? I can't do it every time. Okay, back to our class. Okay. So what happens to the X-rays or photons when they hit the body? That's what we will discuss. So, some X-rays could pass through. Some X-rays they can get absorbed, and some they can become scattered. So now, if you look at this particular image, so this is the coronal slice. So that means we have taken a slice like this and showing a part of it. Here, what you're seeing is the palate, and you can see there is an extra bone that is present, what we call it as palatal porous. And this is the nasal septum, inferior turbinate, middle turbinate, maxillary sinus, and probably a molar tooth here. That's what you're seeing. So now, why do I care about this image? It's because what we have learned so far, can we see and look in this particular image? So if the X-rays pass through, there is nothing to absorb. Like here, if there is air, X-rays will pass through, then it's going to look like a black. Right? Nothing, X-rays can easily pass through. Whereas here, there is a crown here. Here, a lot of X-rays are being absorbed. So that means there is nothing that is coming out after this. So that's why it's kind of a little black, because there's nothing there. The whole crown has absorbed a lot more radiation. And here, you do have a bone here, right? So this will absorb differentially. So each and every part of our jaw, they will absorb differently. So air, X-rays will pass through. And bone, it will absorb little. Whereas metals, they absorb too much. So that's what is going to happen. And because of this, we could make use of this differential absorption and then look at X-rays and identify if there is a dental case, is there a crown, is there a bone, is there a defect, or is there a dental case. That's how we are going to identify. So basically, three things. Like one is called as coherent scattering. The other one is photoelectric and compton. And we briefly talked about differential absorption. So, coherent scattering. I think I changed this image. you may have something different. So the analogy that I would like to use here is, say for instance, on the highway or freeway that you'll be driving on 60 mile road, you'll be driving like 90, and you see a car. What do? Right? You get agitated, right? So that's exactly what happens in the coherence scattering. So the X-ray photon is going to come and hit the body, and then it gets agitated. Nothing is going to happen. So that's called as coherent scattering. Photoelectric. In this case, if the photon is going to hit the internal aspect of the electron, so that is the K shell, then we are going to see a photoelectric. So what is going to happen here in this case is, probably you may have learned about the atoms, which we are going to discuss a little after this session. I think I should have put that lecture before this, sorry. So there will be K shell, L shell, M, N, right? So the innermost shell is called K shell. So if the incident photon or the X-ray is going to hit the innermost one, and the electron will be removed from M, will be transferred to the K. So then there is a potential difference or by energy difference. There is one more X-ray photon will be released. That's called as photoelectric. So we talked about what is going to happen for the inside. What if it's going to hit the outside, like for example, N shell? Then it's Compton scattering. So there are basically three types. One is Compton, photoelectric, and coherent. So coherent is like driving 90 miles. You'll get agitated. You'll see and put a brake. That's what is coherent. Photoelectric, innermost. Compton is the outermost. So remember, when the X-rays are released from the X-ray tube head, it is spatially homogeneous. Yes?
I have a question about the K, L, M, and N levels.
Mm-hmm.
How does that differ from the electron configuration levels of like S, P, D, and N?
So remember, we are going to use very high atomic numbers. So there will be, basically, yeah, if it's going to hit the innermost, so the electrons from outer level will transfer to the inner. So always that's going to happen. So that's the process that's going to happen every time the X-ray hits. So there will be transfer of electrons from higher level to the lower level, and there will be difference in the binding energy. There will be one more scattered electron, or photon will be released, not the electron, sorry, photons will get released. There are two photons, one. We'll talk how the X-rays are produced, and probably you'll get a little more. Okay. So once it is hitting the body and it's coming out, it is heterogeneous. Why? Why do you think it's that?
It's like bounces off of things.
Because it has absorbed, right? In the mouth there will be two, enamel. Enamel will absorb more compared to dentin, so there will be a difference. Whereas when the electrons are released, X-rays are released, it is homogeneous. Whereas it's after coming from the body, it becomes heterogeneous. And because of the differential absorption, that what is being seen on the X-rays, we use this for our diagnostic purposes. We briefly talked about the thickness, right? Like if the patient is slightly chubbier, we may want to increase a little more time or MA so that the X-rays will pass through and we can get a good image quality. That's exactly what we are talking here. And there are two types of attenuation. So basically what attenuation is nothing but the X-ray absorption. That's the technical term for it. So monochromatic, generally with the gamma rays. Polychromatic is what we see with our dental X-rays. What do I mean by polychromatic? It means remember I told you, there will be up to 60,000 electron volts, right? Starting from 0. So there is a difference from starting from 0 to up to 60,000. So there is a polychromatic, or there will be a X-rays that are coming with a different energy levels. That's what I mean by polychromatic. So as we briefly talked about the size of the patient bone density and soft tissues differential absorption will help for our diagnosis. Any questions with this particular topic? Yes.
I know it's not necessarily about this topic.
Uh-huh.
It's more about, since they have that implant there, the retainer,
Uh-huh.
since they have the resection, how do you reduce, like, why is the exposure reduced? Because if you take an X-ray with metal, you get the exposures up here on pans and sets, so why here do you not, like, why is there a reduction in that?
Why there will be a reduction? It's because metal will absorb a lot more radiation. So you are going to see not so much in 2D imaging, with 3D imaging you are going to see much more drastic differences because of how the beam is being released.
Okay, but why in this image specifically do you not see like a big white spot because of that metal?
Because metal will absorb a lot more radiation. There is nothing more coming out. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Compared to other things, like for example, enamel will absorb, but to a lesser extent compared to metal.
Yes, sir.
So we'll talk a little bit about the physics. I think I should have covered this one. So this should have come first. Sorry, I'm covering a little bit. So why do you need to know this stuff, right? Because, as I told in my first lecture, that there are only 2 or 3 board-certified radiologists in Ohio State. I can be in your office, right? In all of your offices. Somebody practicing in North Dakota, I can be there. So that means you have to know about a little more about your stuff, like how the interactions will happen. So basically, we'll talk about the different types of X-rays that are being produced. So, what kind of X-rays are being produced? Like there are 2 types. One is called as film stalling. The other one is called as characteristic, which we, as we move down this lecture, will come to them. And then, can we troubleshoot if you get a Doppler image? What can we do? Of course, we talked about that a little earlier, like changing the parameters like MA, KB, right? So we'll talk about Niels Bohr's atom model, right? The Bohr in physics that you guys left some time back in your undergrads. Remember? There is a nucleus, and surrounding that there will be electrons surrounding. So there will be shells like K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, depending on the atomic number. And the electrons will be depending on the shell. That's like if it's a K shell, there will be 2 electrons, and in L shell there will be 8 electrons, and N there will be 18. So you use this formula to identify how many electrons will be there. So basically, radiation can be released from 2 types. One is called as particulate, the other one is electromagnetic. Particulate, like within the atom, there will be subatomic particles, right? Such as protons, neutrons. And there will be alpha particles, beta and gamma. Anybody heard of this story, Russian story, that a guy in UK died after drinking tea? Russian spy. Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Can you enlighten us?
I don't know. I'm just reading more on the political aspect of it and how the Kremlin was. The UK government said that the Kremlin did it, but I don't know any the physics or the biology behind what's used.
I don't care about politics, man.
Sorry.
I care about physics. So they use polonium. So it releases alpha particle. That's what we are talking here. So alpha particles, they cannot travel a lot more distance. So they don't have very high penetrating power. So if you put in this coffee, I could die in a week's time. You don't have to, like if you take the sugar packet, if you divide like into this much portion of polonium, if you add, I could die in a week's time. Why? Because the alpha particles, they can, since they don't have penetrating power, they go into the stomach and react on the intestine, and it will release the radiation and it will burn. So, and because of that, every other system will be affected. That's the power of alpha particle. Okay? And beta particles, you could use a sheet or wood to prevent the spread. This alpha particle, you can use a sheet of paper like this. If I hold this, and if you are going to emit alpha particles, it's not going to hit me. I can stop it. With the beta particle, you need a sheet of fiber you could use. And with the gamma particles, you need really a 1 meter of concrete. So what are the other things that we could see, different types of radiations that are being released? Or there's something called as ionizing radiation, and there's other part like non-ionizing radiation. So we almost use microwave every day, right? We don't care, right? We do, but this is in the electromagnetic spectrum, but it's not going to cause any ionization. Whereas this one, from here all the way up to here, they could cause ionization. That's why we have to be careful when we are dealing with these effects, especially with the gamma, X-rays, and even with ultraviolet. So what they cause? They strip the electrons. So that means as soon as they strip the electrons, the stripping of the electrons is called as ionization. So we talked a little bit about the energy of the general X-rays, like 60 kVp. Basically, it means that 60,000 electron volts. It's very, very, very high. And we talked about how we can change from 120 to this using step-up transformers. I'm not going to. So basically, ionization, radiation, it means it's removal of electrons. The process of removing an electron is called as ionization. So what is the basic difference between gamma and X-rays? Very important for your boards. X-rays they originate from the electrons that are surrounding the nucleus. Whereas the gamma, it is from the nucleus, the origin. So you need really very high penetrating or high energy things to hit the nucleus so that it can break down. And that's where the atomic bomb comes. Or that's how you make an atomic bombs, and which we are not going to discuss in this class. Yes?
Can you repeat that? So gamma rays originate from and then?
The gamma, once they release from hitting the nucleus or from the nucleus, very high energy ones. Like for example, if there is a polonium, it will release alpha, and then it will decay, then beta, then gamma, positron, all those things as it decays. So what you have to know is X-rays are released from the stripping of the electrons. That's what you have to know.
Dr. Syed.
Yes.
So that goes back to my earlier question. So you mentioned that it's actually photons that the X-ray particles.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said now that it originates from orbital electrons. So is it like
No,
how
no,
do you
no,
get?
no, no. Okay. Nucleus, right? And then there is electrons surrounding that.
Yeah.
And once the electrons, whatever they are in the orbital thing, they are released and they are going to hit the anode part. Once it is going to hit the anode, then we term that as X-rays or photons. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And whatever this we are talking is happening within the anode, the tungsten. So this is very important slide, okay? The earlier slide, sorry. So how do we release or produce X-rays? Two types. Depending on the material that we are using. They are bremsstrahlung. It's a German term for braking or stopping. The other one is characteristic radiation. We have an example here. Yes. Let's look at the analogy here. And then we'll go to the previous slide. So same example, like if you're driving, what do you call it as, 90 miles on a 60-mile road, and you see a cop, what do you do? Come on guys, you did, right? Don't tell me you didn't. Brake. What is going to happen to the rubber? Tires. Yes, that's the sound, right? And lot more heat. So, if high energy photons or electrons, I have to correct, are released and it's going to close by the nucleus, it gets deflected. So this is where, because of this deflection, the X-rays are being produced. This kind is called as braking or bremsstrahlung X-ray function. 90% of the X-rays are produced using this. And the other one is, if you look here, these lines, that's called as characteristic radiation. When you look here, the whole beam, like a bell curve, that's most of the bremsstrahlung or braking radiation. Whereas characteristic is only this and this. Why it is so less is because depending on the material that you are using, like for example, anode, if you are using tungsten, it's going to release a part of X-rays because it is characteristic to that. If you use something more like other material, molybdenum, probably you're going to see a different radiation from that. So you can tell, depending on the material, the anode that is used, it is specific and it is the characteristic feature of that particular material, and they will be very less. So there are basically two types of radiations. One is breaking, the other one is characteristic. So what are the properties of X-rays? They travel at the speed of light, no mass, no charge. That's one of the reasons that since we can't see them, we can smell them, we can feel them, we have to be very careful, right? So we have to follow the protocols, like how far I can stand away from them, because I can't see, right? I don't know whether it's penetrating my body or not, because it's not colored, right? X-rays. And last but not least, it can affect the biological tissues. So they could cause cancer. So that's why we are concerned about X-rays. And that's why we are spending a lot of time learning on this topic. So, 5 things that you learned from this particular topic. What's your name? Yes?
Steve?
No, not Steve.
Sam? Sorry.
Sam Hopkins, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Something we learned about this topic.
Yes, particularly about this topic.
We learned about the gamma rays.
Gamma rays. What did you learn about gamma rays?
How they differ from the X-rays.
How? Priya, you want to help your friend?
Well, the X-rays have a different type of energy level compared to the gamma rays. The gamma rays, they also originate differently. Gamma rays originate from the nucleus, whereas X-rays originate from the orbital electron.
Okay. Yes. What's your name?
Nick,
Nick, okay.
the thickness of material needed to, I guess, block the particle from passing.
Yes.
I guess like to protect yourself.
Very good. Okay. How about there? Third. Yeah, you. What's your name?
I'm Sean.
Sean. Ah.
Hi. The breaking radiation is 90% of all the radiation.
So you drive on the freeway very speed?
No.
No? That's big. That's what Trump calls as bigly lie. So, okay. Yes?
Gamma rays
Your name, please.
Timur.
Timur, okay.
Gamma rays.
So you are here this time in this.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
Gamma rays originate from the nucleus, while X-rays originate from the electrons surrounding it.
I didn't want to say that. Okay. 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 Yes.
A piece of paper and protected from alpha.
Oh. Very good. Your name, please. Frank.
Metals absorb electrons.
Very good. Yes.
Ionizing versus not ionizing radiation can either strip away the electrons or
Okay, very good. Anything else? Yes, Julia.
When a beam enters, it enters homogeneous, and then when it leaves, it's heterogeneous.
Yes. So you guys are experts in the interactions. Oh, let's talk about the Compton versus the, what is that, the other one? Photoelectric versus coherent. Yes.
Can you actually explain that one? So you said Compton is outermost and photoelectric is innermost.
But I
Mhm.
don't understand what you mean by that.
Oh, innermost electrons.
Uh-huh.
So within the body, okay, so after the photons are released, what is going to happen or in the body? Does it make sense? Within the body, okay. Water molecule. Right? Our skin, within our body there's lots of water, right? And when you break down into atoms, it has got nucleus, then electrons within our body. So this is a different concept. So what is, after the X-ray photon is released, how it is going to interact within our biological tissues? That's what we talked about, different types of scattering.
So that's where it's getting absorbed?
Yes, one could be absorbed completely. One could transmit completely. If it's like air. It could react with a different, say for example, metal is there. It could react differently. Because of the photoelectric, because of a lot of absorption, we are going to see the differential absorption, and we could use that as our diagnostic means. If there is that kind of absorption, differential absorption is not happening, or different types of scattering is not happening, then we cannot use X-rays for diagnostic purposes. So the photons that are released interact with our body tissues in different fashions. That's like three fashions. One in three ways. One is it could completely pass through. Like for example, in air, there is no interaction. What if it interacts with metal? That's an example of photoelectric. If it is interacting with a bone, you could use that as a contact, the outermost electron, because they don't have high energy to penetrate and strip up the innermost electrons. Make sense? Yes?
So to go off of that, in the photoelectric, the X-ray beam, it hits, like you said, the innermost, but then a photoelectron gets emitted, and that's what's scattered? Is that what's
So
scattered?
those are things are called as other thing you could call as scattering.
Okay.
Because once it hits the body, everything is scattered. It's not any more homogeneous. The interactions that are happening, we call it as scattering.
Okay.
And then it produces, because of the scattered noise also.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have a lot of energy to hit. So imagine my head, right? And you have a receptor where you obtain an X-ray, right? And X-rays are released, or photons. So this, once it hits my skin, a lot more interactions could happen within my skin. I may have metal, like an amalgam restoration, or I may have a composite restoration. I may have a chubby, like a tummy. Imagine it's here, so it could react, because it's water content here, it could react in a different fashion. So many things could happen. Those reactions we divide into basically three categories. One, completely no interaction. The other one is compound. The other one is photoelectric. The other one is photoelectric. Make sense?
Yeah, so why in the Compton is it, there's a scattered photon and there's a Compton electron? So, why does that take place instead of like in the photoelectric, there was no scattered photon, there was just a photoelectron?
Because of the different binding energies. I did not go into the details because you'll get confused. So okay, as a broader overarching view, just remember for the photoelectric, it's going to strip in a Compton outer.
Okay.
Because if we go into the details, then other students will freak out at me.
Can you repeat that again?
Priya, can you repeat that again?
So my question was, why in the photoelectric interaction do we release a photoelectron and not like a scattered photon? Whereas in the Compton, we have a scattered photon released and a Compton electron. He said, don't worry about that. Just focus on the fact that in photoelectric, we're interacting with the innermost shell, the K shell, whereas in the Compton scattering, we're interacting please.
Thank you, Priya. So now, do you think I can finish in 20 minutes this lecture? No. Let's finish as much as possible then. Okay? Okay. What is going to happen? The risks. Look at this image. So people say that radiation is safe sometimes, right? Nothing is going to happen. And especially the Trump administration. Okay? EPA. I'm not going to go into the politics, but what I want is scientifically a topic that is of most interest to my discussion today is EPA. What does EPA stand for? Okay, so they came up with a proposal that there is certain amount of radiation that's good and certain amount of radiation that's bad. And United States government released that statement a couple of weeks ago. So there is certain amount of radiation that is safe. So people, like public, they could go gaga, right? Oh, EPA, wow, that's authentic body, it's saying there may be certain benefits. Is that true? That's what we are going to discuss today, or this particular topic. Is there any safe radiation, or absolutely no? So just looking at this particular slide, you should have got an answer, right? There's nothing like safe radiation, right? For example, let me give you a very good analogy. Say for example, since we are living in Cleveland area, I'll select some street, just a random street. Oh, there is a name by random street here, right? Yes. Let's select that. Okay. Random street. People will say that don't go after 7 p.m. on that road. What do you do? No, I'm just saying this analogy. Calm down, calm down.
Know the rule.
What do you do? How many of you go? Nobody? You go? One, okay.
My guess is I'll hear it and then forget it and remember it while I'm doing it.
Okay, that's an exception, okay. How many of you don't go? Me too, right? Yeah, majority we don't go. Similarly, when we know that there is a risk with radiation, do you play with games with that? The answer would be no. So that's what we will be talking in this particular session. So if you are interested to know, these are the guidelines we use. And let me tell you, what is the risk of developing a cancer? If you look at this particular stats, this is from the American Cancer Society. As we get older, there is a chance of getting a cancer, some kind of cancer. Like as we get older, like 70 and above, there is a high chance of getting cancer, like 40%, right? On top of that, we have to take into the consideration, like when the patient is getting an X-ray. It's added to that, right? If a person is flying, they could get radiation from a different source. A person from Iran, where there is a lot of nuclear activities are going on, they could get exposed to that. Or Marshall Islands, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or Fukushima recently, right? So we have to take those into consideration as well. Like, for example, if the patient is getting 10 CTs versus 1 CT, is there any dose that the patient is getting, 10 versus 1? The answer is yes, because the patient is getting more radiation, right? So what is radiation biology? It means effect of ionizing radiation on the living systems. Somebody has to keep a track, 9:15, please. Otherwise, I may be flowing through. So we looked at this particular slide. So we know about ionizing versus non-ionizing radiations. The things that we are more concerned are like gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, they can strip the electrons. So that's why we have to be careful with those. And this is an example. People lost their fingers dealing with radiation. So we learned from those things and we try to protect ourselves. So some terms that we use in radiation, or when you're dealing with radiation, are like, for example, the amount of radiation that is produced in 1 cc of air is the term that we use, exposure, and Röntgen is the measurement that we use. Absorbed dose, energy imparted by radiation to matter. What I want you to know is this: 1 gray is equal to 100 rads. And 1 sievert, S-I-E-V-E-R-T. Probably they could ask you on boards. Not on my exams, but for boards, yes. Equivalent dose. So how do you compare the biological effects of different types of radiation? For example, alpha versus gamma versus beta or X-rays. So can they cause different types of radiations or risks? That's called as equivalent dose. And if throughout the body is exposed, what is the dose we call? It's called as effective dose. And some other terms, I will leave it up to you guys. Please read at your leisure. So what I want you to focus is this one. So NCRP is one of the bodies that always comes up with new things, and they say that these are the certain organs that are susceptible to radiation. For instance, if you look at this, this was in 1990. They said salivary glands are not susceptible to radiation, but they came up and they gave a different number. So that means salivary glands are also susceptible to radiation. So that means when we are taking intraoral radiographs, we have to be careful not to overexpose. Meaning to say, don't take 200 retakes, right? If appropriate, take 1 or 2. Because we are not doing any beauty contest, right? Which one is better? No. Is it diagnostic? Can I use this information? Can I look at this radiograph and can I diagnose? So what is the basis for cancer is if the X-ray photons are going to hit a DNA, then that's a problem. So 90% of the times our body tries to repair any exposures. Certain times it may not be so. So on average we are exposed and our body will deal with 200 injuries and it can repair itself on a daily basis. So there are 2 types. One is indirect mechanism, the other one is direct. Directly it can hit the DNA and it can break the double helix. Or indirectly, since our body is composed of water, these photons can react with water and they can produce hydrogen peroxide, and it can in turn break down into OH or H2O2. that is hydrogen peroxide. And in turn it can break down and cause the DNA breakdown. So that is the indirect mechanism. So if there is a single-stranded DNA breakage, then most likely the repair can happen. But if it's double-stranded DNA breakage, then that's where it's lethal. Biologically, the body can't deal with that. So I will complete this slide and end my lecture, okay? So mitosis is like a cell division, right? That's happening. So at what stage or during the process of mitosis, the cells that are most sensitive are at mitosis, like young. If you release the radiation, if the cell is undergoing a division and it's happening mitosis, it could cause cancer. But least resistant is at the S phase. Very, very important for your boards and for my exam as well. 9:50 on time. Any questions?